Trina is here to give us another opportunity to civically engage, to learn more about her story and what she is doing in her run for Congress. And I also want to remind everybody that there's a primary on August 11th at the Community Center if you are an Ely resident. So make sure you know your primary location, get registered to vote at the farmers market, and show up to share your thoughts on our civic communities.
So nice to be here. I might take this off actually, if that's okay. Thank you for inviting me to Tuesday Group. This is just awesome. I didn't know this happened, and it's so incredible that you all get together and learn and have community and have this opportunity to engage, so thank you. My name is Trina Swanson. I grew up in Hermantown. I actually live about half a mile down the road from where Pete Stauber lives. And I'm going to get Pete Stauber out of office in November. I like that enthusiastic applause. But I think it's really important, before I start talking about what's important to me in this campaign and my platform, is how I got here and who I am. So like I mentioned, I grew up in Hermantown to very blue-collar parents. My dad was a carpenter, and then he moved to the paper mill for more steady work. And my mom was a nurse for 42 years at St. Mary's Essentia. And so I very quickly learned the value of unions and what unions brought to our family and our stability, and my parents' ability to pay the bills with that union pay and the ability to collectively bargain for those benefits. But my parents worked really hard, and there were hard times. There were times where they couldn't make ends meet in a given month. And I learned the value of having to work hard, but still not being able to make it sometimes. And that's really what started my push. And I went to college at St. Thomas and law school at William Mitchell, and I was the first person in my family to get a 4-year degree, much less a doctorate degree. And that was because of my parents and the support that they gave us kids to follow our dreams. And I had started as a public servant when I was just 18 years old. I started with the U.S. Bankruptcy Court in Duluth, and I was just a paper pusher, filer, whatever they needed me to do. And I worked my way up in the bankruptcy court, and that was my job for those years in school. And then when I graduated law school, I owed $170,000 in student loans. And I'm sure many of you have experienced that, or your kids have experienced that. And the hardships that we put on our kids just to get an education. And so I thought, what am I going to do with my life? I owe all this money, I worked hard to get here, and I started working for U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services. And it was an incredible career. I was with them for 20 years, and it was a career that allowed me to represent our government abroad. I served in Germany for 5 years. I ran our office in Nairobi, Kenya for 4 years. I spent 3 stints in Washington, D.C., and I ran our Minneapolis USCIS office for 2 years. And then I found myself back in Washington. DOGE came barreling in. I was the Director of International Operations at the time, overseeing 13 international offices. And overnight, the rug was pulled out from under us. And it was far worse than what you heard on the media. So I was not allowed to have a town hall with all of my staff like I'm doing with you. It was banned. I could not put any guidance or policy or memos in any emails because they didn't want it leaked. And quite honestly, they knew what they were doing was illegal. And then the final straw for me was being asked to check on a visa for a nanny of a DOGE member that was working out of DHS. Because immigration's okay when it's for them folks, but it's not okay when it's for the rest of us. And so I decided that I had to make a very difficult decision to leave a career that I absolutely loved, that I thought I would do for another 15 or 20 years, so that I could keep my integrity, so that I could stand up for what's happening with this administration. And so I left that job. I started my own immigration law firm, and then I looked around in Hermantown, and I saw all of these missing, have you seen this man, Pete Stauber signs. And, I had been calling into his town halls. I had been trying to ask questions. Of course, he didn't want to take my questions, so I was screened out right away. You have to lie, apparently, and say you're going to ask about wolves, and then he'll put you on. And I realized that I had incredible skills that I had gained in my career in foreign service and foreign policy and diplomacy and immigration and national security. And I could use those skills for good. And I could continue my public service career, but as an elected official. And so I decided to run for Congress. And that's why I'm here today. So I certainly want to leave time for questions, and I know you have a lot of them. I heard you ask good questions, but I want to talk about some key critical parts to my platform that are important to me. Because we're not winning this election cycle by bashing Pete Stauber or by bashing Donald Trump. We are going to win because I'm going to share what my ideas are, what I want to fight for in Congress, what I will bring to this district as the next representative. And that's the important piece we need to get back to. Not the hateful rhetoric, not the scoring of political points, but actually coming to the table and solving problems. So the first thing, the most important thing to me is getting universal health care in this country. And this is really personal to me. So in 2018, my mom had a stroke unexpectedly. And my mom was carrying the health insurance for her and my father until they reached 65 and could get Medicare. My dad was struggling at the paper mill. He was working 13-hour shifts, overnight, holidays, days, and he couldn't sleep anymore because his body was just not regulating. And so my mom said, I'll keep working, I'll keep the health insurance. And then she had that stroke unexpectedly, and she found herself in Essentia, where she gave 42 years of her life to. And they said, okay, you have FMLA for 12 weeks. If you can't return to your job, we're unfortunately going to have to terminate you. And so they terminated her. And my parents found themselves having to go on COBRA and pay an incredible amount of money just to keep health insurance and ensure that she could get the treatment, she could go to rehab, she could get what she needed to recover from this stroke that was also an open heart surgery and a new heart valve and a pacemaker. Now, watching your parents go through that after working for decades and decades was a really hard thing to do. And so I'm so grateful to say she's here with us today. She's doing well. They're on the trail a lot, so hopefully you'll meet them at some point. My parents just celebrated 48 years together. But nobody should have to do that. Nobody should have to be one cancer diagnosis away from bankruptcy. Nobody should have to worry about their parents getting the medical care they need. Nobody but should have to worry about getting terminated from a job and not having health insurance. And so I am going to fight for universal health care. And guess what, folks? We can afford it because we get to decide how we spend our money. So we know it's going to be a battle. We saw it before with Obamacare, right? But we can't settle for less this time. In the interim, though, there's some things we can do. We can ensure that we go back to negotiating with these drug companies. We know they're charging a fraction of the price for the same drugs in other countries than they're charging in our country. We know we have medical conglomerates. We're not using our antitrust laws. They're able to charge whatever they want to the insurance companies because they're the only shop in town. And we can also cap life-saving drugs like insulin, which Pete Stauber voted against in the House, by the way. Second is our affordability crisis. We're watching people struggle right now. We know prices are going up in everything from gas to our car insurance premiums, to our medical care, to our groceries, to our energy bills. And so we continue to watch that happen and see people struggle. And folks, I think it's not a left versus a right anymore. It's a 1% versus the 99%. And we're watching Congress prioritize the 1%, prioritize the corporate profit. Last year alone, we had 88 corporations in our country not pay anything in federal taxes. Can you imagine? 88. I mean, they made, I think it was an incredible amount of money, billions and billions and billions of dollars, and didn't pay a single dime in federal taxes. And meanwhile, we're fed the crumbs. We're told to be happy because we saved on average an extra $350 on our tax return last year. $350. You're already paying more for that in gas and groceries in a month. And so we need to look at it differently. We need to have a Congress that prioritizes the working class, the middle class, the folks that are paying their taxes, that are struggling to get by, the people that want to stay in the communities that they grew up in and raise their children and then retire with dignity. And we can do that. Minnesota pays more in federal taxes than it receives back. And we're one of the few states that can say that. And now we have a president that wants to go on TV and say, well, I need $1.3 trillion for DOD. Sorry, I will not call it the Department of War. It's the Department of Defense. For DOD. And, oh, I don't have money for the states. I don't have money to support your schools. I don't have money to support your child care. I don't have money to support your rural hospitals. Look to your states for that. Well, what that means, folks, is that our property taxes continue to go up, because that money has to come from somewhere as a backstop when the federal government stops properly funding. So we know our schools are struggling. We know that our special needs students are not getting the funding they need at the schools. We know that our rural hospitals may have to close because they're not getting proper reimbursements for Medicaid patients. We know that we're not getting in the doctors that we need, the nurses that we need. We're even deporting them now, right? We're not giving them student visas. And so we just really need to rethink what we prioritize. And that, to me, is having a Congress that prioritizes the 99% and not the 1%. The 1% has made enough money, folks. We have our first trillionaire. Our first trillionaire. Imagine what we could fund with a fraction of his money. And by the way, Tesla was one of those corporations that paid $0 in federal taxes last year. So, you know, it just really bothers me, the values that we currently have in this government, what we're prioritizing, and what we're devaluing. And that needs to have a major shift. We need to go back to that 99% and stop fighting each other and stop thinking it's left versus right, because it's not. It's really that 1% versus the rest of us, and we need to pay attention, and we need to get in a Congress that will make that flip. Let's talk about the boundary waters.
Yeah.
Man. Okay, so we absolutely cannot allow mining to occur in our boundary waters watershed, period. But follow the money. We know we have Antofagasta, right? A Chilean mining company that's headquartered in London, that's founded by a billionaire family, a man who rented his very home to Ivanka Trump in Washington, D.C. We can look at all of these agreements. I just read about the mining agreement in Kazakhstan. And guess who's all involved? Our Commerce Secretary, his sons, the Trump sons. Everything they're doing is to further enrich the rich, right? Without any regard for our environment, without any regard for the communities it's going to disrupt, without any regard for this pristine, special, amazing place that we have here in our great state. So we cannot allow this foreign corporation to come in to mine our minerals. We know we don't have sufficient processing, smelting plants in the United States, so they likely would be shipped abroad for processing, for us to then be able to beg to buy them back with tariffs in place. Make it make sense. And I know Stauber likes to say it's to reduce our dependence on other countries for critical minerals. Do we need to do that? Absolutely, but nothing about this plan will do it, especially if they're processed abroad and we have to beg to buy them back. And we can't sacrifice this special area for those minerals. It's just a no for me. So we need the state to partner up. We need the state to stand up to this mining project as well. They need to get involved, but we need a Congress that's willing to fight back. We need some of our agencies to step up and say no, to look at those leases and withdraw them and prevent them. Whatever we can to stop this twin metals from occurring in this watershed. But that's going to take all of you to ensure that we can flip this seat and that we can pick up some additional ones in Congress and turn that blue. But I want to let you ask questions. There's so many issues. I struggle with which ones to talk about, quite honestly, because we could talk about all of the issues for hours. But, you know, we do have a primary in August. I misspoke. Hamilton is running against Stauber. And then we have two people that are primarying me, Munter and Galbranson. So I'm asking you, before we move to Q&A, to please vote in your primary. So you can vote absentee right now. The primary is on the 11th. Really, folks, this election cycle is too important. It's too important for two things. One, to have somebody we send into Congress again that doesn't have the experience or the competence to do their job and is merely a rubber stamp for an administration or a party, either side. And two, we can't be single issue voters. So I can't be your perfect candidate. It's not possible. Because what's most important to someone here in Ely may not be the most important thing to somebody in Scandia in the southernmost part of our district. And so we have to focus on getting people in Congress with integrity, people that will do the right thing, people that will go in and say, you know what, I made that vote because it was the best vote for the greatest number of people in my district, and not necessarily what the party wanted. And somebody that will go out into the community and hold their head high and explain why they voted the way they did, and listen and learn and grow. Nobody's perfect. I don't have all the answers. So it means engaging with people, hearing from people. We hit all 21 counties in just the month of April alone. I held listening sessions that were open to the public in every single county, so people could come out, ask the questions, engage with me, tell me what was on their mind, even if they disagreed. And that's what a representative should be doing, not hiding behind a computer screen. So please vote on the 11th. I am the candidate that has the experience, that has the leadership, that has the grit to actually go in on day one and do this job. It's not an easy job. We can't be sending someone in that has to ask where the bathroom is in the Capitol on the first day. Like, you have to be able to go in and have the experience to do it, to understand how Washington works, but more importantly, how it's not working right now. And be able to go in and be a fighter. We don't need another rubber stamp, folks. So please, if you can support me on the 11th, I would greatly appreciate it. The other thing that I have to mention, or I get yelled at by my campaign, is this takes money. So we know Pete Stauber already has over $1 million in his coffers. I think 700,000 of that came from corporate PAC money, folks. Imagine all the corporations that he's beholden to. I'm not taking corporate PAC money. I'll take PAC money from groups that are important to me, that my values align with. I will not take corporate PAC money. We need to get money out of politics, or we continue to have the same Congress we have. So anything you can do to help contribute to this campaign, I would greatly appreciate it. It costs significant money to run a campaign until we do take the money out of politics to try to compete with this big money and the mega money that we know is going to be thrown at Stauber. So question time, what do you got for me? Ma'am?
Before I ask for a lawn sign, I have an important question. Do you believe in real science or fake alternate science? And this is in terms of not just chemicals in our water and chemicals in our lives, but also health. And also nature, because in the news, I'm reading about a mass dying out of birds because the ocean waters have changed. They're warmer, and climate change is obviously more than just warming, it's change. But birds have been dying on the coast because they can't eat fish and other organisms in the ocean waters because they've gone down lower and cooler waters. So we're having almost extinction, not yet, but going to it. So do you believe in real science or the alternate science?
I absolutely believe in real science. That's part of all of my platforms, actually, that we trust the scientists, right? We know science is a real thing, at least it used to be in this country, and we need to go back to that. But it also means bringing back our executive branch agencies, right, that do have the scientists. And we can talk about that in terms of healthcare, in terms of cures for diseases, in terms of our forestry service, in terms of so many agencies that we've seen depleted. The fact that they want to close this Grand Rapids research facility that was looking at the impact of climate change on trees and different temperatures and diseases in our trees, like, that's shameful. And so we need to rebuild those again. We need to bring science back. We need to trust the scientists and make our decisions based on that science. So absolutely, ma'am.
Now, Pete has an almost a 100% record for voting against women, women's rights. And do you believe that women's rights are human rights?
Yes, ma'am. I also think they've been severely eroded, right? We're watching every day an administration and a Congress that is willing to suppress voting rights of women, limit their reproductive rights, get engaged in medical decisions that should be between a woman and their doctor, and just attack women, right? And want them to be stay-at-home moms, which is fine for many women, but also people need choices, right? And should not be pushed into a certain lifestyle because an administration thinks it's best. So I will absolutely fight for women's rights. And I think this is a good point to say as well, because we're watching our LGBTQI plus friends and neighbors and family go through the same thing. That's very akin to what's happening to women, and many of those are women in that category as well. But we need representation that will fight for that group of people and make them feel welcome, and that they can live their lives how they deem fit, and that the government has no say in that and shouldn't have a say in that, and should also not have a say in medical decisions that are between a person and their doctor. So we also need to go back to fighting for those folks and ensuring that they feel welcome in our community. And I think it's been a really tough time with some Supreme Court decisions and some real hateful rhetoric coming out of our politicians against groups of people. And we need to be better than that.
Thank you for ranking. If I remember correctly, Stauber has lost the 3 Boundary Waters counties in each election, Cook, Lake, and St. Louis. You talked about the interests of people in Scandia, which is a good example of being different. How do you tailor the message, if you will, if that's a fair question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No.
How do you talk to people in the southern end of the district?
Yep. I think that's a great question, right? How are we going to win this? Bottom line, it's the affordability crisis, right? For everybody. The people in the South are paying Twin Cities prices. They're not earning Twin Cities salaries. People are having the same issue. We have 90,000 people that are going to lose their ACA subsidies in our district alone. We know that people are going to see an increase in their premiums by around $180 a month after the midterms. We know people even on good insurance where those premiums are going up and people can't afford it and they're dropping their health insurance. We know people can't afford their energy bills. We're watching everybody get this option now from Minnesota Power, for example, of here's your different rates depending on the time of day you're using your energy, right? But by the way, let us put in a data center. So we are going to hit on that affordability crisis. We're also going to have conversations. So when I got out into those 21 counties, I engaged with both the right and the left. Because again, we need to come together and we have more in common than we don't. And I started those conversations with help me understand why you voted for Pete Stauber. And then we have a conversation. And so I had this very conversation with somebody active in the Carpenters Union. And he said, well, Trina, he got us all of the money to do the infrastructure projects in Duluth. And I said, respectfully, sir, he didn't. He voted against that infrastructure bill. And we had a 25-minute conversation. He took my phone number. He asked for my website. He's like, I'm sharing this with all my friends. We still talk today. He got me in front of that union in Hermantown, and I engaged their whole group of members that showed up on a given night. Now, they endorsed Stauber last cycle. Guess whose barbecue I'm going to tonight? The Carpenters. So it's having those conversations. And it's a lot of work, right? We have 750,000 people in this district in 21 counties and 31,000 square miles. I got my 3rd oil change in a matter of months this week, and I'm like, please, 2019 Jeep, we gotta make it till November.
You can stretch it when there's a lot of highway miles.
That was the same advice my dad gave me, so yes. That was stretching it actually by 4,000 miles, don't tell. But this is what we have to do. We have to have those conversations. We have to start by opening up the dialogue, not shaming folks, not saying that was the wrong vote, you screwed up, you did the wrong thing, you're thinking the wrong thing, you're worried about the wrong thing, right? Because what is hitting for people can be different between families. But overall, it is that affordability crisis. It's what we're valuing in this country. It's how we're deciding to spend our money. It's watching that working class, the 99%, be squeezed out while they just keep accumulating wealth. And so we're gonna just keep having those conversations. But it's also social media, right? We need to meet people where they get their information. And whether that's newspaper, radio, social media, digital ads, like How do we get the message out in the facts? Here's how Pete Stauber voted, here's how it's impacted you personally. And so we're doing that with a variety of topics. If you follow me, you can see we've talked about our housing insurance and how those premiums have skyrocketed in Minnesota. They went up the most in the whole country just here in Minnesota this last year, which is crazy to me. We don't have the hurricanes, we don't have all that stuff, but we saw that increase. It's highlighting that out of the 47 teams in the World Cup, we're the only country without universal health care. Imagine, the only one in the World Cup, right? And so it's using these facts, getting people that way. Again, I'm not going out with hateful rhetoric against Pete Stauber and Donald Trump. People knew Donald Trump was not a good person and they put him back in office. So we have to find a different way to reach people.
Hi Trina, thanks for coming. I'm really enjoying getting to know you. I've become increasingly concerned about Christian nationalism and sort of the creeping disrespect for the separation of church and state. Let's say the Democrats win the House and not the Senate. Is there anything that can be done by our political body or bodies before Trump leaves office?
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the Christian nationalism first. I'm a Christian. I grew up as a Catholic. And I think what I value is actions, right? You can say you're a Christian all day long and you can use that to score political points, but what speaks to me more is what you're doing for your friends and neighbor and your family and how you're living your life as a Christian that gives back to your community and ensures everyone feels supported. But you should also be free to practice whatever religion you want or none at all. And that's been something that's been ingrained in our government that I think is incredibly important in our country, that we have that freedom of religion. And we don't bring in religion and mix it with politics. It should not. Because that just leaves a good chunk of our country feeling like they're not represented and that the focus is on a particular religious group. And we can see the Republican Party using this as a way to vilify groups of people and further separate us in our communities and make us fight each other while they just line their pockets with money. I always like to say, you know, they like to be like, look at the squirrel over here, right? And then all the American people look at the squirrel over here, and then before we know it, he's made $102 billion on cryptocurrency or whatever his total was. I don't think it was quite that much, but it might have been. And hey, if you buy my cryptocurrency, I'll invite you into the White House and you can have an audience with me and tell me what's most important to you. Like, that's not the government I grew up with, nor the government I want to continue to age with. So look, if we only take the House, and you know, I know there's some things happening this week that's making the Senate look not so great, which is really disappointing. You know, we can still go forward with impeachment. Obviously, the conviction piece will not happen, but we need to hold people accountable, right? Because I thought that our branches of government would be stronger. I thought our guardrails would be stronger. I thought our Supreme Court would be stronger. That we would have a backstop, that we would have a Supreme Court that would uphold the Constitution, and we're not seeing that happen. And so we need to ensure people are held accountable, that our political appointees like Kristi Noem are held accountable, because otherwise in 50 years from now, who's to say someone doesn't try this again? And so we need there to be consequences to the actions and what's happened here. I mean, I'm still hopeful of taking both, and then I think we impeach and convict. I think we have to have investigations into all of the actions of political appointees and other government employees that upheld illegal acts or committed illegal acts, and then people are held accountable.
I have two questions. One is mine and one is representing a Zoom question. You talked a lot about the 1% versus the 99%, and in my own work and in my own thinking, I'm really seeing how sticky the conversation around elitism is, and to really bring it close to home, like I think so many people in this room are considered like the bad elites, but really we're part of the 99%. And I wonder if you've had any conversations with people who are politically differently minded than you, where you felt like you were able to effectively add nuance to the conversation around elitism, because both parties are angry about it, but we understand it very differently. So how are you addressing elitism?
Yeah. Well, I think we have to start by recognizing, like, I am very pro company. I'm very pro people working hard and earning good money and being able to do what they want with it. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the billionaire, the trillionaire. We're talking about the 88 companies that pay no corporate tax at all. But our Congress has allowed that to happen. They've allowed that 1% to occur because we just keep cutting programs to give greater tax breaks. We have tax loopholes. We're allowing corporations to prioritize their what they earn over all else, right? We're watching like Walmart, for example. How many of their employees are actually on federal benefits like SNAP because they're not earning a livable wage to raise their family? Meanwhile, we know that Walmart's bringing in billions and their shareholders are bringing in incredible money. And so when you can buy back your own stock to prioritize company profit and shareholder profit above all else, that's not working. And we've tried trickle-down economics for decades, folks, and we see where the middle class is today. And so we have to have those conversations in terms of real facts and real federal programs that are impacting people when those are being cut. Because I think a lot of folks don't understand what the federal government actually does for our daily lives and what funding comes from the federal government that impacts us daily and why we need that. You know, I posted about the World Cup stat last night after the game, and I was so shocked with all of the comments I got. Like, we can't do this. Why would we want universal health care? That's too much money. All you want to do is raise my taxes. Why don't you move to a different country if you want something different? We'll get to that last comment in a minute, but we can afford it, folks. If people look at what we spend on in terms of emergency medicine, people that don't take care of themselves through preventative care because they can't afford it, the government pays an incredible amount of money for that. So take all the hands out of our medical system, the medical conglomerates, the insurance company, the pharmaceutical companies, and then look at what it would actually cost us as a government. And I don't want to raise your taxes. I want the 88 corporations to pay taxes, and then we have universal health care. So it's not, you know, you work hard, you make money, you should be able to enjoy that. That's not what we're going after. And I don't want to raise your taxes. You already pay enough in taxes. Well, other people don't pay any. The issue about moving to a different country, I'm gonna have to, I think, go live on this or post a video because what an incredible comment to make. I'm not moving to another country. I'm staying here and fighting for the country that I love to make it better. And that's what we should all be doing because we can always be better. We need to fight for the country we love, and we love this country. It's a great country. We know the incredible history of this country and being a country founded, you know, by immigrants, and you know, we're making huge strides to give land back to our tribal nations and repair that relationship and ensure that we have a wilderness and clean water and wild rice and everything for decades to come. So we need to fight for our country, and we can get better.
I would like to represent Ben on Zoom, who says thank you for being here, and then asks what organizations are endorsing you now, including unions, women's groups, and nature organizations.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I have Save the Boundary Waters, which I'm really proud of. Also been endorsed by Women Winning very early on, and I went to their lunch. It was so incredible. All the women that they've endorsed for this cycle, both sitting and running candidates, got to walk out and engage each other, and it was just really powerful. I've been endorsed by MAPE, which is Minnesota's Association of Professional Employees. I had my AFSCME screening last week, so hopefully I'll hear on that soon. Same with the Carpenters. And then I've been endorsed by the DFL Veterans Caucus, the Rural Caucus, the Senior Caucus, the DFL Party, which I'm really proud of because we got that endorsement on the very first ballot with 72% of the vote, despite 8 other candidates. So, I think that's it. But we try to update the website with all of the endorsements as they come in. I will say a lot of the labor unions have, they're very supportive of me. I think the primary changed a lot of things. So endorsements that I anticipated coming in sooner, they've kind of stepped back from because of the primary, which is unfortunate. But that's okay, we'll get over that primary hump. And I've been engaging extensively with the labor unions. It's critically important to me. That's how I grew up, how I mentioned. And I was also in a union when I was with USCIS. I was part of the American Federation of Government Employees. And so that was a union I was part of for a decade before becoming management. And so unions are really important to both my personal life and my professional life, and who I think are important to engage with and have that open line of communication, even once you're elected. So when I go and talk to the labor unions, I hear time and time again, Stauber doesn't take our calls anymore. Or we go to the Capitol and we can't even get him, we might get a staffer in the hallway. And so we do see him now that it's an election year getting out there a bit more. But I was really excited, I don't know if you remember when he went to meet with the Teamsters, it was a big kerfuffle and people showed up to protest and the media was kicked out. Well, I met with Teamsters 346 last week and they were like, by the way, you had a bunch of people with your signs at that meeting. And I was like, yes. So we are engaging heavily with the unions.
One of the terrible Supreme Court cases that came out last week was one that kind of flew under the radar, which was allowing corporate PACs to coordinate their spending directly with the campaigns and the candidates. I'm curious what your reaction is to that and how that will affect the legal environment going forward.
I hate it. Citizens United just opened a door for dark money. There was an incredible statistic of how much money has increased coming from corporate PACs and dark money in our election cycles since that Citizens United ruling, and once people really figured out what it meant and what they could get away with. And until we take money out of our politics, we're going to continue to have the same Congress that we have, and that's one that does not represent the people. Because you have to raise millions of dollars to get into office, then you get there and you have to run, if you're a representative, 2 years down the road. And so you take that corporate PAC money because it's easy money to come in. It's not the little donation from the neighbor that you have to go out and meet. It's money that can come in unlimited amounts, you don't know where it's coming from, and then you get beholden. And then you have lobbyists, right? And you start to vote a certain way because you know you got that money or you need that money for the next cycle. I think every candidate for a particular position should have the same amount of money. I think for some of the races, I think we should actually publicly finance them, right? Because it would be fair and we'd actually be spending a lot less as a country if we did that. But that takes standing up, right? Because the media markets love campaigns at a time, right? Love elections. We have so many companies that are making money off of our election cycle. And so you're going to need a Congress that's a new wave that's willing to make the hard decisions and the hard pushes to get the money out of our elections. So have that same amount of money. You can only run for your position for so many months, kind of like the UK does, right? So we're not in this endless cycle and you don't spend all this money. And then I think there needs to be term limits so you can ensure that you have representatives that are still connected to their communities. Term limits and mandatory retirement ages. I mean, right now we have no idea where Mitch McConnell is. Yeah, or if he's alive, honestly. Which is crazy to me, right? How much manipulation goes into keeping power. And when I served abroad, I wasn't in the Foreign Service, I was there for Homeland Security, but Foreign Service officers under the Department of State have to spend so much time in DC every so many years because the thought is you lose touch with your community. And these are diplomats that are even representing our government on a daily basis. And they say, no, you need to be home in the United States with your community, understanding what's going on. That should be the same for representatives. You're in Congress for 30 years. You don't know what's happening back here. You have no idea. You've lost touch. You're in your fancy, members only places, smoking your cigars with your bourbon. And so I think we need to have those term limits and take the money out of it, or we're going to continue to see issues. And this just opened it up even more now for state parties to spend unlimited amounts on federal candidates. And so I think we're just on this dangerous path. And until we change that, we're in trouble.
I don't know that this is a fair question.
Uh-oh. Is there an exit out here?
We are up to our armpits in alligators, and it's hard to remember that we want to drain the swamp. Is there anybody, and this is future projecting, our form of government was put together when this country was half of the continent across, and Pony Express carried voting results. In the last 100 years, in my lifetime, we went from airplanes with 4 wings to flying helicopters on Mars. Is there anybody looking into the future of what a government might look like that would function in this age with this technologies going and be democratic and not allow one person with some other backers to take over a whole political party and take over the country with 1/3 of the vote?
Yeah. No, I think that's a fair question. I do a few things that give me hope. One is that we have really cool candidates that are running for Congress. And I don't mean cool in like they wear the right clothes and they have great socials. These are people that left the government, that were committed to public service, and they took a stand like I did against Trump and what's happening, and said, I'm going to do something to fight back. And there's over 20 of us that are trying to get into Congress right now in that very position. And so I think we need the freshman class, we need incoming people that are bringing fresh ideas, that are willing to fight, that are actually doing this for the right reasons and not power and money. And I think there are a lot of candidates out there, and I know all of us would appreciate everyone's support, because it's going to take all of these seats even outside of our district that we need to flip to take that back. There also is a group that's working on Project 2029 for the Dems. And I've engaged with them on immigration issues. So it's how do we fix our immigration system? How do we get immigration reform through Congress? How do we ensure what happened with ICE and CBP on our streets doesn't happen again? How do we ensure USCIS functions so that they're efficiently processing benefit requests and keeping families together that are qualified and eligible for it? And so there's really smart people that are working on Project 2029 for all areas of the government. And so that gives me hope, because we're not going to just fight to get back in, but we're actually going to have a plan for how we can undo all this damage. But third, I think it goes back again to money, sir. Like, until we take money out and you actually have representatives that are doing it and senators doing it for the right reasons, and you don't have to spend all your time fundraising, you don't have to spend all your time beholden to taking those lobbyist phone calls and those corporate phone calls, things can't change. And so, you know, just from personal experience, like, I probably shouldn't be standing here today. I started my campaign at a conversation in my camper with my parents saying, do we think we actually can do this? Like, do we want to enter this world? Because I gotta tell you, it's filled with alligators. And so when I said I was going to run and I announced, there were a lot of naysayers, and there still are. Who are you? Why do you think you get to run for this? We didn't pick you. We didn't anoint you. You're not from the DFL insiders. You didn't put your time in. And then, okay, how much money do you have? Are you putting in your own money? Do you have wealthy backers? Like, where are you getting your money? Is it coming in? How much have you fundraised? Why can't you raise more? And so if you don't have all of that, it is very hard to get here. And I've just fought day after day after day to prove myself and share my story and why I'm running and what my ideas are. But the system isn't built for people like me. And so until we change things and we allow people like me to get into office, we're going to continue down this dangerous path.
Hey, so I volunteer for the GFL, and I also move in like some leftist circles. And what I've seen lately is that there's way more movement and momentum in the far left in sort of like socialist groups and things like that, especially in Minnesota post ICE occupation. And a lot of people on the far left are like kind of fed up with the Democratic Party as a whole, kind of fed up with electoral politics in general. You know, they voted for Joe Biden, they voted for Kamala Harris, and they just don't really see anything happening. So I'm curious, like, how do you get those people on your team? Where is your alignment with like leftist groups and the far left, and where do you disalign? Where are the places where you diverge from those groups?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great question. I think we win this cycle though through groups, not just the DFL, right? Through like the DSA in Duluth, where they're particularly active, I'm sure here as well. Indivisible, that started as nonpartisan. Groups that are just like, I'm fed up with both sides. Neither of you are doing what I need, so let's just vote for candidates that we think are good. I mean, believe it or not, universal health care is still a leftist policy, which is crazy to me. I haven't verified this, but I was told my primary opponent has backed off of universal health care and doesn't stand for it anymore, right? And so I think that's a very big difference just in our primary for the Democratic candidate to run against Pete Stauber. So I think there's a lot of policies that we need to do, and you can hear my 1% versus the 99. Like, we actually need to completely rethink how we govern and what we prioritize and what we spend our money on. But we also have to go back to this Ely versus Scandia, right? Because you can't make change if you don't win. And this district is still very, very red, honestly. So we have to be able to pull those red voters over to this side, not alienate them, in order to make that very impactful change. And I think that's kind of the tough part about this race, right? In being able to connect with both sides and the very left part of the party and the moderates and even some of the Trumpers that are not hardcore Trumpers that might vote this time with us. But sir, there's not much that I don't align with, I think. You know, we can have a further conversation on the major platforms, but we have to focus on the message that's going to resonate with everyone, and that's the affordability piece. And then we get in and we do the hard work of making real change, making sure the 99% is supported and prioritized. We have that universal health care. We look at what we're doing as ally to other foreign nations and what our foreign policy is, and we make those changes.
I'm going to quickly interject and say that we have time for about 2 more questions, but I know there might be some time at the end to come up and talk personally, if you'd like.
Are you familiar with the Problem Solvers Caucus, and if so, could you talk a little about it and whether or not you would want to join that?
Yeah, I'm not super familiar, but I know what it is, and you know, bringing people from both sides to the aisle that want to find middle ground again and come together, and I think that's what we need to do. So my entire career, I've been a pragmatist. I've had to run complex organizations and teams and offices and bring people together with many different viewpoints, which can be incredibly challenging, but also rewarding. And so you bring everybody to the table, you identify possible solutions, you pick which one you think is the best for the greatest number of people that works, and then you have to sell it and get buy-in. And that's really what Congress does, right? You have to build coalitions, you have to get people on your side, you have to sell your bill so you can get those votes. But we need more of these caucuses that are actually going to identify solutions that work and come together from both sides of the aisle and implement those through our bills. And we're just not seeing that happen. We can't even pass a budget bill. And so we're just in this place right now where party comes before all else, and I think that's incredibly dangerous. You should actually be representing your district. You should actually be voting what you think is best, and you know, that's hard with the money system we have. And we also need more than 2 parties, right? I know we've got to talk about ranked voting. We've got to talk about other ways that we can get rid of just having 2 options, because that doesn't work for a lot of people, and it probably shouldn't, right? Because we just have then a dearth of ideas, and we're voting party line, and we don't make the major movement that many people want to see in this country.
Oh, this is a comment, not a question. In case some of us don't know, Minnesota has what's called a PCR, Political Contribution Refund. Unfortunately, it wouldn't work for you because you're a federal candidate, but for any state candidate, it's $75 a year for an individual and $150 for a couple. And when you give them money, you will get a receipt and you will send that into the state, and the state will send you a check.
Yes, and you have great state candidates up here, so Aaron is fantastic, so highly recommend donating to him. We're actually door knocking together a week from Sunday. No, this Sunday.
We're so fortunate in Ely to have candidates like Trina stop by and speak with us, and to have so many opportunities to civically engage. I'd like to remind everyone once again that the primary is on August 11th. And between now and then, there was a plethora of announcements of other ways you can engage with our community, both civically and in just community building practices. We'll see you all next week, and probably tonight at the farmer's market.